There, and thank you for joining us today at our last Good Governance webinar for the year. And today we're going to be looking at evaluation and reporting and how trustees can get involved in that. My name is Tracy Bird and I run the SCVO Information Service and our trustee network. Please note that this webinar is being recorded and will be available later on the SCVO website. And you'll also get a copy of the slides and any other resources from today in a follow-up email. If you prefer, you can switch your camera off, and I would ask you to mute yourselves as well during the presentation. We'll be inviting you into brief breakout rooms halfway through the session, and they won't be recorded, but I hope you'll stay with us and contribute your own thoughts and experience on evaluation and reporting. So, evaluation is about pulling together information about what your charity does, who with, and what difference you make for the people you work with. If you collect this evidence, then you can make effective and informed decisions as a board. But what's the best way to do this? Well, I'm delighted that we have with us today Stephen Marwick from Evaluation Support Scotland, and he's going to take us through how trustees can approach evaluation and reporting and get involved in telling their charity story. Stephen's the founding director of Evaluation Support Scotland, and he has many years' experience in supporting our sector to demonstrate the difference it makes. But before I hand over to Stephen, I'd just like to ask Julie Hutchison from Aberdeen PLC, who are sponsors of SCVO's trustee network, to just say a few words about why evaluation and reporting is vital for effective charities. Thanks, Julie.
Thanks, Tracy, and evening, everyone. It's been great to be involved in the trustee network this year, and Aberdeen's been really delighted to sponsor it. I think evaluation, kind of a logical theme to be doing at the end of the year, maybe as we take stock and look back. But I think it always generates a good debate. You know, is evaluation something you simply do because a funder has asked you to? Or is evaluation a genuine learning experience where your charity is seeking to understand what's gone well and look for ways to continue to improve? So really interested to hear what Stephen's got to say, and handing back to you, Tracy. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Julie. Okay, Stephen, I'm going to hand over to you now for your presentation. And as I say, as we go, put any comments, questions in the chat. Thanks, Stephen.
Hello, good evening. My name's Stephen Marwick and I work for a charity called Evaluation Support Scotland. I'm also a trustee myself of a charity called Eczema Outreach Support, but I'm wearing my day job hat this evening, talking about why evaluation and reporting matters to trustees. So Evaluation Support Scotland, as I say, is a charity, and our job is to work with lots of other charities and funders so they can measure and report on their impact and use learning to improve practice and inform policy. And we've got loads of free resources on our website, and we'll also be sharing this presentation with you, as Tracy said, after the webinar, so you'll be able to look at the slides at your leisure. The format of this evening is I'm going to speak for a bit and just give you some background, some hints and tips and ideas around evaluation and reporting, just very light touch. There'll be an opportunity for you to ask questions if you have any, and please can I stress there's no such thing as a stupid question. So I'll guarantee you that if you ask a question, 5 other people will be thinking, thank goodness that person asked that question. So please do ask questions or make comments. We'll also be splitting you into smaller breakout groups to have an opportunity to share your experiences. Although I'm obviously marvellous, it turns out that quite often you learn more from each other than you do from me. So I'll give you a couple of questions just to discuss in this short breakout groups, and you can have a chat and share your experiences. and thoughts. We'll come back for some final thoughts, any other questions that's provoked, and we'll finish in good time so you can have your tea at 6 o'clock. But before all of that, I'm just going to kick off with a small icebreaker. So according to Wikipedia, there are 7 basic story plots. And so when we're talking about evaluation reporting, we're really talking about telling the story of your charity. So I'm interested in, just as a bit of fun, thinking about which of these Wikipedia story plots might relate to your charity over the recent times. So is it Overcoming the Monster? Is it Rags to Riches? The Quest? Voyage and Return? Comedy? Tragedy? Or Rebirth? So if you can I invite you to pick one of those and type it into the chat, and I'll just ask a couple of people to say a little bit about why they picked what they wanted, what they wrote. If you don't want to speak, that's totally fine, just stay on mute and I'll pick somebody else. But just see if you can pick one of those and say which of these resonates with you in terms of your charity's recent story. So lots of people writing in, thank you very much. Can I, if you're okay to speak, can I invite Claire Gilfillan to say a wee bit more about why you picked Rebirth? Claire, if you're all right to speak.
Hi there, I'm Claire and I work for Glasgow and Clyde Rape Crisis. And we've been going through a period of change for the last year and a half. And we've had a couple of change managers in, and now we've got a new director. So we're still changing. So it's like a rebirth. Yeah, and we've now got another 5 new board members on. So everything's happening at the one time. And my role has changed slightly, so I'll be having more to do with the board. So I'm just trying to find out as much information as possible.
Thank you very much, Claire. We appreciate that. Lots of times of change for you and your charity. Craig Wynne, are you all right to speak and tell us why you picked the Quest?
Yes, hi. So I'm Craig at LGBT Youth Scotland. The Quest, I think, is a pretty good one for us because we've been on a bit of a digital transformation journey for years now. So I mean, rebirth and kind of this context of the pandemic is surely appropriate to everybody, I suppose. But the Quest is really something we've been really trying to reach this goal of digital transformation for a good long time. And I think we're kind of hitting that point now where we're very near the end of our big journey. We've fought all the scary monsters and whatever else along the way. And we're getting there, but we just need to get over the line with 1 or 2 big projects over the next year or so. Really exciting times. But yeah, I've been in the charity as digital youth worker and now as a sort of data and development manager. So also learning a lot as I go through.
Thank you very much, Craig. Great to hear. And let's hear one more person. Sylvia Jameson talks about Rags to Riches. Sylvia, are you all right to tell us why you picked that?
Hi, yep, I'm Sylvia. I just started work in October for an Aerospace Heritage Centre. That's a charity preserving aviation heritage. They've just had their 10th anniversary and they've spent 10 years building up for absolutely nothing, completely voluntary, no money at the beginning, and are slowly built up where they have a community asset transfer building, a large collection, and now they're looking for the big pots of funding and a new build interactive heritage centre. So very much climbing towards riches, hopefully.
Wow, exciting. Thank you, Sylvia. A good time to be joining them, I suspect. Great. Well, thank you very much for sharing that. And really, that's what this is all about. Evaluation reporting is really just about telling the story, the challenges, the opportunities, the excitements of your charity. So I'm just going to share my screen again and do a few more slides, just talking a little bit more about evaluation and why it's relevant for charity boards. So first of all, as Tracy said earlier, it's really important to take, and Julie said as well, it's important to take evaluation seriously. Here am I taking it seriously as a superhero, maybe not quite seriously enough. But anyway, it matters. It's about understanding what we do, what difference we make, and what we learn. And it matters because it's important if you're a charity trustee or if you work for a charity to know the difference you make. You want to know that you're making a difference, and you want to know what difference you're making. You want to know that partly because you want to celebrate your success. And in particular, over the last couple of years, we've had a lot of need to celebrate success. It's been challenging times for all of us personally and professionally. And so being able to say, we're making a difference as a charity, we're doing really good work. It's really important to be able to step back and talk about that and show that, evidence that from our evaluation and our reporting. As charities, we also want to be able to tell others what we're doing and what difference we're making. We might need to tell our funders, we should be telling our stakeholders and the people that we work with and for. We might also want to tell government, local or national government. We might have stuff we want other people to know. Some charities are campaigning, some charities want to change other people's attitudes or ways of working, and sometimes we just want to explain what the people we work with need and why what we do matters to them. So that's a sort of outward reason for evaluation. But a more inward reason is also about learning and improvement. So nobody's perfect. We've always got things that we want to do a bit better or a bit differently. And again, over the last couple of years, we've all been doing things quite differently. We've all had to go on a digital journey, whether it was our strategy like LGBT Youth Scotland or just by accident, we've had to learn how to deliver services online. So there's been a lot of learning and a lot of things that we needed to get to grips with in terms of improvement. So evaluation is important, not just to celebrate success, but to identify what we can do even better and the changes that we can make. And I think most important of all, evaluation should be an opportunity to ensure that the people that we work with and for, that their voice is heard. So a key part of the process of evaluation is about collecting feedback from the people we work with, asking them to tell us what we did with and for them and what difference we made and what we can do even better. And that in turn allows us to hear our service users' voices and, as appropriate, put that into our own forward planning and into the information that we share. So evaluation matters, and it's important to do it well. Now, we're talking from the perspective of trustees this evening, so I'm not going into a lot of detail about how we do evaluation because that's an operational task and trustees generally wouldn't be doing the operational work of evaluation, but there is a lot of information on our website about how you can go around doing evaluation, and just a couple of key principles about that. First of all, it should be proportionate, so don't spend so much time in doing evaluation that you're not actually doing the work. It should be built into the way that you do your work. So ideally collecting information with and for your service users as you go along, and do it in a way that works for you and your service users. So that's not always a questionnaire. There's lots of creative ways of doing it and ways of collecting qualitative stories as well as statistics. So that's the process of doing evaluation. But as I say, that's really largely an operational role. So if charities have got paid staff, it's probably the charity's paid staff that are doing the evaluation. Where does the trustee fit in? Well, one important thing is that trustees should be talking about evaluation at board meetings. Sometimes it's a bit tempting as a board of trustees to be constantly looking forward, and that's good. You're planning and having strategy, but it's also important for the board to look back a bit and see what's been going on, what have we done, what difference have we made, and making sure that evaluation is on board meetings can help that happen. As I say, not getting involved in the operational detail, but understanding the big picture about how the charity is performing is important for the board to be able to do. Another key role for charity trustees is simply just to check that evaluation is happening, to check that if there are paid staff, that somebody is collecting information and data back from service users, recording what's going on. And maybe it might be that the board needs to think about how that's resourced. We don't want to spend lots of money on evaluation because the majority of our resources should be spent on delivering the services. But there might be some small resources that need to be put in place just to make sure, and that in turn might need to be built into funding applications. So trustees might have a good role in making sure that the systems are in place to ensure that evaluation happens and is recorded. Another thing a good trustee can do is share the evaluation results. So when you've got a good story to tell, really important for charity trustees to take that role about shouting about the charity's work and its impact, and being able to share that through your networks, with your social media, if you happen to be on it, and so on. You can, of course, and should be using evaluation for planning. So when you're sitting down to develop your next strategy, your next work plan, your next board plans, you should be using what you've already learned to inform the future. So evaluation is important to be used in planning. And ideally, as a board of trustees, unless you're a brand new charity, you should never be starting with a blank sheet of paper. You should be thinking about what we've learned in the past and using that evaluation for planning. And finally, we need to be using evaluation to write the TAR. And TAR, as I'm sure you know, stands for Trustees Annual Report. So that's one of the things that a good board of trustees are responsible for, is to write the Trustees Annual Report. So that takes me from the process of evaluation into the process of reporting. So moving on to the next slide, what is good charity reporting? Well, I should stress I don't work for Oscar, the Scottish Charity Regulator, but I do work quite closely with them, and so does Tracy. And so I think I can say with confidence that these are the kinds of things that Oscar would say makes for good charity reporting. So first of all, it's a legal requirement. All charities are required to report. And so that's not just the financial details that goes in our annual report. We also need a narrative report in our annual reports, some words that tell the reader what we did and what difference we made. Charity reporting should be about transparency and accountability, so it helps the public and the people that we work with and for to know what we've been doing and what difference we've been making. But a good charity report should also be informative, actually tell people some interesting things. Readable, so not in fancy jargon or complicated words. And this is a phrase that Laura Anderson from Oscar uses. She's a senior member of staff at Oscar. She talks about a good charity report is personalized and has personality. And I really like that phrase, because what she's doing as the charity regulator is giving us permission as charities to actually put ourselves into our charity report. So not necessarily to use fancy words or difficult jargon, but actually to be able to tell the story of our charity in a way that makes sense to us and the people that we work with. And that might include using photographs or quotes, but certainly not being too worried about telling our story in a way that works for us. So that's for good charity reporting. And a key thing about good charity reporting, this is true for the Oscar report, for the Trustees Annual Report, but it's also true for most reports to funders as well, is that a good report will tell these three things: what you did, what difference you made, and what you learned. Now, some funders want other things as well, but we do a lot of work with funders at Evaluation Support Scotland, so I can say that I know that most funders want to know the answer to these three questions. What did you do? What difference did you make? And what did you learn? And the Trustees Annual Report should also answer these three questions, because basically that's telling the story of the charity. So what did you do? What difference did you make? And what did you learn? What you did is your activities and with whom, but the difference you made is about that impact. It's about what people can do and achieve thanks to your charity's work. And that learning bit is important too, because that helps us understand what we're doing really well and what we need to improve. So final slide here, you'll be pleased to hear, is just some top tips for charity trustees about supporting evaluation and reporting in your charity. Firstly, I think it's quite important to try to get the balance right between performance and learning. Some of the charities we work with, my organisation works with, will sometimes say that boards of trustees can maybe be a little bit too focused on performance, and that's important. We need to know how we're spending our money, whether we're achieving our performance indicators. You know, there'll be certain performance things that trustees will be interested in knowing. But actually, a good board of trustees will also be thinking about what are we learning and create that safe space to share what we're learning, what's going well and what isn't. So getting that balance right between performance and learning is, I think, an important role for charity trustees. A second thing that a good charity trustee can think about is to be aware that when you're coming to reporting, it's your story. So your evaluation and your reporting should work for your charity. So that means that one size does not fit all. There are some good principles, as I mentioned before. You should be able to talk about what you did, what difference you made, and what you learned. But the way you tell that story could be very different if you're a large charity than a small one, and different kinds of charities will want to tell that story in different ways. So feel confident that you should tell the story in a way that works for you. And please don't be browbeaten by your auditor, your independent examiner who says you must do it this way. Their job really is just to make sure that the numbers match the words. Your job as a charity trustee is to tell the story in a way that works for you. And my final tip here is don't be scared. Evaluation can sometimes be scary, reporting can sometimes be scary, and I understand that, and that's why my organization exists, to provide advice, and as does SCBO. But actually, if you're just focusing on the idea that your evaluation and your reporting should be simple and useful, those are two key principles, actually, just focusing on collecting data and reporting in a way that is simple and useful. And then hopefully that makes things a little bit less scary and more useful for you. So we're going to go on to group discussions very shortly, but I'm going to stop sharing and pause to give you an opportunity to ask questions. So you can do that in any way. You can wave at me. You can, if you're clever, go down to the bottom of the screen and see the reactions and click the wave button, or you can type into the chat. If anybody's got any questions or comments you would like to make, just let me know. So Julie, thank you very much for kicking off, and says, what's the most creative method of evaluation reporting you've seen? So in terms of, if we come away from the trustees annual report, because there are some restrictions on that, although I have seen some quite creative infographics and photographs in the trustees annual report. So even there, I think it's possible to be fairly creative. But thinking about other kinds of reporting, well, actually nowadays, a lot of charities are thinking about using video as reporting, creating YouTube videos and short clips. And once upon a time, that was incredibly expensive and difficult to do. And a lot of funders said, well, we can't even look at a video. Whereas actually funders, for example, like the lottery, are quite interested in seeing videos. And in terms of telling your story to your stakeholders and the people you work with, a video can be a really nice way of helping your charity's work come alive and get service users to speak using their own words and talk about the importance of the charity. So I think it's not the whole story, but I think using video can sometimes be a good way to tell stories. Using photographs and diagrams as well as words can be good. Thank you, Julie. Tracy asks, how do you approach evaluation and reporting if things have gone wrong and there's a lack of success? That's a great question. My view is that actually, in my experience, it's unusual for absolutely everything to have gone wrong. So there's usually something in there you can point to that says, actually, this was successful. But also, and also things are never, completely a failure. It's usually something about it didn't quite work as we expected, or there were some challenges along the way, or it took longer. So first of all, I think it's about kind of breaking that down and saying, what do we mean by failure? What didn't go well here? And actually, in terms of reporting on it, well, first of all, internally, you definitely want to report on it internally, because as a charity, you want to think about what you want to learn and what you want to do differently in the future. In terms of reporting publicly, well, for transparency and being open and honest, you should probably make sure that you do share what went wrong. But some charities like to think about, well, actually, let's not just stop the story at this went wrong, the end, but actually move the story on into, and this is what we're going to do about it, or this is what it's told us about the challenges along the way. And so actually being able to turn your negative story into a positive story about learning, or what you might do differently in the future, or what that's told you about need, for example, because things going wrong might not actually be that it was your fault. It might just be that, a service user need was greater than you expected, or there might be other issues going on. So definitely important to be transparent about it, definitely important not to sweep it under the carpet, definitely important to share it. and recognise that actually increasingly funders are really interested in understanding what's not working so well, because that helps them with decision making, and it makes your charity more credible. It makes you look like an organisation that's interested in learning and being transparent. So I would say don't be too afraid of sharing what's not working, so long as you're able to learn. Natalie Thompson says, she's just agreeing, yes, especially, exactly, Natalie, you're totally right. The importance about actually reflecting on, nobody should be saying, we did exactly what we expected during COVID, because that, of course, didn't happen. So really important to share that learning. And we've been working with a lot of charities to think about how they use their evaluation and learning to inform their future, and thinking about what didn't happen or what could happen differently directly as a result of COVID. Robert Landon asks, do you know any good system for recording and compiling evaluation data to simplify the process and make management reporting to the board less time consuming? Well, the bad news is there's no one right answer to that. You have to kind of make it work for you, Robert, I would say. But there are some good principles, I think. We talk about sometimes a learning funnel. So the amount of information that goes to the board will be much smaller than the amount of information that a project worker, for example, might collect with and for an individual service user. But it's trying to make that link between what you aggregate up. So understanding how this whole story of a service user's life might be blended into a few key points that go up to the board is some of the things that we quite often do when we're working with charities to help them think about that sort of journey up from the service user experience up to the board. And in terms of systems, I think it really is about finding, IT obviously can be our friend here, but finding simple ways of using Excel spreadsheets. My own charity uses Salesforce, which can be free to charities, but not overcomplicating things. Too many charities have been stymied by horrendous databases that don't work for them. So actually being prepared to keep it simple. Less is more often, so it's better to ask a few key questions and get good data than ask 20 questions and get rubbish data. So trying to sort of focus on the things that really matter and the things that will really tell you the most useful information. Craig says, how much weight should be given to impact versus performance in the evaluation? Is it 50-50? Do they usually correlate? Again, I'm afraid I'm going to say it's up to you. It varies from one charity to another, and it'll also vary to actually what's going on for you at this moment in time, I think is the answer. So give yourself permission to the fact that it might be 50-50 one year and 75-25 the next year, depending on what matters. I think so long as you're doing both, that's the most important thing, would be what I would be saying. And of course, one feeds the other, but making sure that you're doing both would be my answer. Thank you for those great questions. I hope what I said was vaguely useful, but here's your chance to reflect a bit more. I'm going to, in a moment, invite you to go into breakout rooms, or rather our brilliant staff at SCVO will do that for you. But let me tell you what I'd like you to do in the breakout group. So I'm going to invite you to discuss 3 questions, and I'll put these into the chat as well so you can take a note of them. I'd like you just to share with each other about what does good charity reporting mean to you. There's no right and wrong answer to this. I'm just interested to know, and you'll be interested to know from each other, what it means to you. You might want to share with each other what gets in the way of good charity reporting, and what could make charity reporting easier and better in your charity. So what does good look like, what gets in the way, and what would make it easier and better? This is an opportunity for you to share your experiences. There'll be loads of good learning and ideas that you can share with each other, but it may also provoke a few more questions that you might want to bring back into the full session afterwards for further discussion. So I'm not going to, if you can identify somebody who's going to feed back, that would be great, but I won't ask you to share everything you discuss. So this is, this is your opportunity to share with each other what you want to share, and then we'll do a brief bit of feedback just before the end, and you can ask any more questions. So in your groups, if you could discuss what good charity reporting means to you, what gets in the way, and what would make it easier and better in your charity. And so the amazing SCVO staff are going to put us into breakout groups right now for 15 minutes, and then we'll come back and have a final wrap up. Thank you. Welcome back. I hope you had a useful discussion. I was lucky enough to be in a group with some great people who are working in very different charities, and we were able to share some experiences about different approaches to evaluation and reporting. We don't need to hear a lot about what you talked about, just share what you feel able to share, but it'd be lovely to hear any insights or challenges that came up in your groups. And so feel free to wave at me or speak, or oh, Una has got a question. Una. You mentioned Salesforce was free to charities. Can you clarify this? Yes, there's so many licenses you can get for Salesforce that you don't have to pay for. I think it's not, limitless, but that's how it works. He says vaguely. I'm not directly responsible for it in my organization, but I can send you some information afterwards if that would be helpful. I'll dig it out and let you know. Julie, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to offer to feedback from our group. We had a really interesting discussion with some common themes around what has been a prompt for change, and whether that's in evaluation reporting, particularly how you might approach an annual report to make it a bit more interesting rather than dry. And the fact that during lockdown, the move on to Zoom, and actually some trustees deciding to step back at that point, and that creating space for new trustee recruitment, and the role that new trustees have played in some of those organisations, prompting some opportunities to take a fresh approach to things has come through. So the value of Zoom and change during the period we've had has come through as a theme.
Fascinating. Thank you very much. Sylvia, you've got your hand up.
Just a couple of things for one group, Stephen, follow on for what Julie said about Zoom and moving online. It also posed some challenges in evaluation, because we had somebody in our group that works for a charity to do with a long-term health condition, and some of their service users are bedbound or housebound, maybe in areas with poor internet connectivity. So the difficulties in getting feedback for some of them, and also capacity directors, sometimes easier if a charity has paid staff to coin some of the evaluation was a key point.
Excellent points. Thank you, Sylvia. And I think you're right. Zoom has been both, or online generally has both been an opportunity in terms of delivery and evaluation, but also a real challenge. And I think really important to be able for charities to say we're not all the same. And for some of us, the increase in technology has enabled us to reach more people and do more things more creatively. And for others, it's really been a real challenge, particularly, as you rightly say, Sylvia, if you're working with people who are digitally excluded or can't use. So I think it's really important that we're open, because that kind of information is really important for the recovery. How do we support ourselves, support people, vulnerable people in the future, and being able to sort of record those challenges and strengths. And then your other point as well about who does the work, and if you don't have any paid staff, then it really needs to be light touch and good enough for a small charity. And in my view, certainly, the smaller the charity and no paid staff, it should be really, really simple and focusing on getting the job done. Thank you. So I'm really glad you raised that. Any other insights or challenges that people want to share? Yes, Robert, thank you.
Something which Claire in our group suggested I really liked, which was about making the reporting more accessible. So our service users in Parent Space, parents, they're really busy. They don't have time to or inclination to get on the website and read a 20-page annual report. So I think she suggested, breaking it down into bite-sized chunks and just over the course of a month or so, getting it out on social media so that certain user groups can actually access the information, and so it's not invisible to them. So I really appreciated that idea. We had lots more ideas if anyone else from our group wants to chip in.
Lovely. Right, well, we'll trademark that one. Thank you, Claire. That's a great idea. And thank you, Robert, for sharing it. Sylvia's raised a question. Good to learn from others who do something like your charity. How do they evaluate? Sylvia, do you want to say a bit more about what you mean?
It was just something, Stephen, that came out of our group that we had a discussion around mind shades and how you evaluate the work at a tool library, and can you learn from another area in the country, or in this case Chicago, about how they're monitoring and evaluating. If they're further down the path than you are, don't reinvent the wheel.
Excellent point. I really agree with that. Yes, and opportunities like this, actually, just to share ideas, can sometimes give you something to go away with and think, oh, I could do that. Yeah, it's a really good point. Thank you. Any other insights or challenges that people wanted to share? Tracy, do you want to say more about what came up with you?
Just we discussed, you know, how you do get the important service users, beneficiaries' voice into your evaluation, and how difficult that's been with COVID, social distancing. Some organisations are looking at maybe doing things around Christmas, you know, socially distant with post-its at tables, and what's good about this, what's bad about this. But yeah, there was some really creative ways of doing that. I don't know if anybody else has any thoughts on getting how you get that into your evaluation.
Thank you, Tracy. I'm really glad you've raised this. Getting service user input into the evaluation is a big thing for me. First of all, just asking the people that you work with for feedback is in itself really important, but also we can also ask the people we work with how they want to give feedback. And get their input into the way that we do evaluation. And we've had some lovely examples of charities who put some of their service users in the lead of evaluation, just really designing methods, saying, let's rip up this tedious questionnaire and do something more interesting. And just saying, this is how I'd like to give feedback to you. And this is the way that would work for me. And also the point you're making there, Tracy, about trying to build it into existing activities so that it doesn't feel like an add-on for the service user or the person that they're actually, you know, giving feedback as part of another activity, which sort of feels more natural. Thank you. So we've got a mix of, and we'll be winding up very shortly, so don't worry, but we've got a mix of paid staff and trustees on this very call, which I think is really interesting. And we had a bit of a discussion in our group about you know, the role of trustees, with a mix of paid staff and trustees in my small group. And I'm just interested in that whole business about where the trustee comes in, especially Sylvia's point, when you've got a really small charity and the trustee might be the person who has to do take a lead on evaluation. But if you're a larger charity and you've got paid staff, how that we engage our trustees in this process. And I'm just interested if anybody's got any thoughts that this seminar has prompted for you in terms of the role of trustees in evaluation reporting, or thoughts that it's raised. Maybe do you want to share an idea that's come up for you as a result of this? While we're thinking about that question, Claire's come in with how you collect service users. Claire, do you want to say a bit more about that?
Yeah, throughout their sessions, we obviously we put like the data on, you know, appointments and things like that. But on their 5th and their 10th sessions, we get another colleague to call them to evaluate the service that they've had. But any comments they make throughout their sessions, like, I don't know where it'd be without this service, is collected separately. So that's also included in our reporting as well, about, you know, comments that the women's have made about the service. So that shows throughout the year as well. So that's how we collect it.
Thank you, Claire. So a good example of both systematic and opportunistic, brilliant blend. Thank you very much. That's great. And another point in the chat being that funders are often the trigger for evaluation. So funders are a blessing and a curse in this world. they make us do it, which is bad, and they make us do it, which is helpful. So the good funders make us do it in a way that is really helpful. And Sylvia's right. Some funders can provide advice and support and even pay for it. So do ask your funder for help. Don't be afraid. Particularly independent funders and the lottery can be very helpful in this regard. And it can be difficult, but feel free to challenge your funder if you can, if they're asking you a stupid question. Some funders are easier to challenge than others, but we've had quite a lot of examples where actually funding officers didn't realize they were asking an unhelpful question. And you can say, actually, it'd be better if we gave you this information. Here's what you could have won. And funders can be quite receptive to this. And in fact, Kate is an example of a funder. Do you want to say more about the marvelous things you're doing?
Well, at the moment, we're very short on funds to distribute, so we're redistributing other people's funds, but we're kind of an intermediary, so we're a housing association charity. So we used to get lots of government funding, and we don't anymore. So we've had to redesign ourselves quite a bit. What my priority is, as a person who's had to apply for funding on so many occasions and come across all the barriers, including the ones, I think, the Scottish Legal Aid Board, they provided funding for a welfare rights team that I was involved in. And I have to say, we had to take on a whole extra member of staff just to provide the evaluation and the feedback because of the level that they wanted. And it was then the decision was taken not to bother applying for it again, because it just wasn't worth it. And so when we are operating at full grant giving capacity, I'm lucky. I manage funds management for other organisations, and so I get to sort of nudge them in the right direction and say, only ask for what you actually need. Don't ask for endless things, and proportionate. That's the biggest word. Is if we're given a grant of 10,000, it's not the same as giving a grant of 400,000. Again, if it's a £2,000 grant, you ask for even less, because funders are meant to be enabling charities, not disabling charities.
An excellent soundbite to finish on. Thank you, Kate. That's a brilliant thing for us all to remember and to remind our funders if we're not ourselves a funder. Well, I think we're almost out of time. So Tracy, I shall hand back to you, but thank you very much for those really helpful thoughts and ideas.
Thanks, Stephen. That was great. Great discussions going on. Yeah, thank you for your presentation and the opportunity to share ideas, and to everyone for taking part. As Stephen said, we'll email the slides out to you tomorrow. And thanks to Julie and to Aberdeen PLC for all of their support this year. It's really appreciated. As we said at the beginning, this session and all of the good governance webinars that we've done this year in partnership with Aberdeen are available to watch on the SCVO website. And in case you've missed any of them, we've covered topics ranging from cyber resilience to mediation, climate change, young trustees, business planning, and one we did last month is on lived experience on boards. So I would encourage you to check them all out. You can watch them at your leisure. And just finally to say thank you and good night. Thanks.